Warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We, the Group 1, are going to present on our topic, which is about the nations and people should always forgive the wrongs of the past. Evaluate this value. To divide it under three themes, which is number one, history, number two, religion, and the third one is culture and education. So I'm going to be presenting first under the topic of history. This I'm going to be only focusing on our country, Brunei, and its history, through, which is the occupation of British Empire and the occupation of the Japanese. Brunei under the British occupation. To understand the context on what what did the British do that wronged Brunei, we need to go on a little bit of on a history journey throughout Brunei so that we can understand what's going on. Okay. It began in 1839 when James Brooke arrived in Borneo to help Sowas II in its rebellion, which in turn gained him the title of Raja of Sarawak. From there, he slowly expanded his territories by conquering Bruneian lands and eventually gained control most of Brunei's territory. Then, in 1846, the Brunei town was attacked by the British forces and the Sultan was forced to sign the treaty. From then on, multiple treaties were signed, such as the Treaty of Labuan, where the Sultan has to give Labuan to Sarawak, and there's actually more. So, from this short summary, we can learn that Brunei lands, most of the Brunei lands were taken by the British, mainly James Brooke, and as well as they are not afraid to use their weapons on Brunei if the demands were not met. So those were wrong. Relationships between Brunei and the British Empire. Even with its rich history of Bruneian lands being taken by James Brooke, we still share a friendly and positive relationship as both countries, Brunei and British, United Kingdom, are the members of the Commonwealth. The United Kingdom and Brunei also have a trading have a positive trading relationship where the exports from Brunei to the UK were totaling about £100 million. Even though Brunei was independent from the British rule, uh, they still deal with foreign affairs in Brunei. Now we are moving on to the Japanese occupation. Occurred in 1941 up until 1945. Under the Japanese occupations, the Bruneians have had a harsh treatment by the Japanese soldiers. Citizens of Brunei were often worked to death to provide the needs for Japanese. This includes food and medicine. This in turn causes Bruneians to starve and suffer from malnutrition, and even die from diseases such as due to food and medicines were quite unavailable back then. The Japanese soldiers does not only occupy Brunei, they also occupied Malaysia, which is Malaya back then. So the people in Malaya were forced to be unpaid laborers to support the Japanese army. Locals would also be tortured or even executed if caught not obeying their rules. Many people suffered and died from diseases as well as starvation, and among the other races, the Chinese suffered often the most due to the Sino-Japanese War that occurred before. Um, that is the war between the Japanese and the Chinese. So, what do we learn here? We learn that the Japanese, the Malaya and the Bruneians, um, they have quite an equal treatment, which is a very, very harsh treatment. They were forced to work for the support of to support the Japanese army. A lot of people died from diseases as well as starvation. The Japanese instilled fear to both countries, um, as well as both suffered heavily. Even with it, our terrible history with Japan, we moved on and have maintained had maintained a positive relationship, as Brunei was one of Japan's largest source of energy, exporting crude oil and petroleum gas. Um, Japan is one of the biggest trading partner with Brunei for many years, and both countries have conducted an exchange program in the fields of technical cooperation, education, and culture, among others.
Next up is the religious perspective. In Islam, forgiving is not obligatory. We can deduce from the Quran that forgiving is not an obligatory act upon Muslims. This can be seen in the mentioned verse from Surah Ashura, chapter 42, verse 40 of the Quran, where Allah allows those who are wronged to inflict equal and proportionate to the evil deed through legal means, while highlighting that forgiving the evil deed is preferred. A similar point could be seen in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 179, where the kin of a murder victim is given a choice between waiving the death penalty through forgiving or following through with the execution. Moving on to the benefits. Firstly, forgiveness brings joy and reassurance. Second, it gives peace of mind. Third, to earn forgiveness from Allah. And lastly, it shows that you're taking the high road. Holding a grudge or taking revenge is easy, and choosing to forgive others is hard. But it shows the strength of one's character and help us grow spiritually. In conclusion, Islam is a realistic, practical, and humanistic religion. Humans are different emotionally, physically, and intellectually, thus the ability to forgive differs too. Some may be able to overcome the pain quickly, while others require more time. Hence, it is alright if a Muslim cannot and would not want to forgive, and it is also alright for a Muslim to merely forgive but not forget.
The next themes are the culture and education. Brunei's tradition, which is the Malay Islamic monarchy, which is known as the Malay Islam Raja, is heavily influenced by the tradition of Brunei culture with religious teachings of Islam, which aim to forge a stronger sense of identity, especially among Bruneians. We are encouraged to forgive others, which is strongly influenced by the Malay cultures and Islam. Whoever forgives from the heart will be given great rewards by Allah, and we know Allah's rewards are the best from all. Especially during Hari Raya is the time of the Ramadan when the families and friends reconcile with and forgive each other's past mistakes among many others. Normally, in the first day of Raya, family members traditionally engage in a salam or a handshake according to the Malay culture and ask for forgiveness, especially by the young people, as a sign of respect. In education, especially in school, you can learn new things when we forgive others. If you forgive them when they do things wrong and help them through it along the way, it will help them to learn good behavior in class. Forgiveness is also an opportunity to allow students to solve problems on their own. Encourage them to acknowledge what they did wrong so they can figure out ways to improve this behavior.